I'm Brad DeLong, and this is my morning coffee. Jan de Vries ran our first Econ 210A class yesterday, Introduction to Economic History. It's for the first year PhD students in economics. Jan spent rather more time than I've spent in the past on what he called apologetics. That is, the question the students might naturally ask of why are we making them take an economic history course in their first year here at Berkeley in the University of California PhD program. It's very unlike the rest of the program. The rest of the program consisting of econometrics, of high microeconomic theory, of macroeconomic theory at an intensive and relatively advanced level. Jan spent time answering that question, and he gave a historian's answer to that question. That is, Jan gave a narrative, a particular individual story, a talk about a historical process that could never have been repeated, a talk about the formation of the social sciences, about the rise and fall of positivism, and the subsequent vicissitudes of economic history as a subdiscipline within economics. It was very good. I was very impressed. But it struck me after the class that I should have taken up a little bit of time to give not the historian's answer to this question, but rather the economist's answer to the question. Why would an economist say we make first-year PhD students in economics take economic history, learn about things from Moses Findlay's view of the ancient economy, to Avner Greif's account of the Maghribi traders across the Mediterranean, to the British Industrial Revolution, that they're rarely going to see later on in their career? And I think the economist's answer to Jan's question goes roughly as follows. You see, economics is the hyper-positivist of the social science disciplines. It believes that everything, or maybe almost everything of interest, can be reduced to law-like theoretical and empirical propositions modeled after classical mechanics. That what cannot be reliably, repeatedly, quantitatively, and empirically demonstrated, that it does not really exist, or does not really exist as knowledge, that it cannot be relied on in any strong sense. That basically the only good social science is a deductive, analytical, model-based, general and generalizing experimental social science. But this misses a lot. After all, because we are people like those whom we study in economics, in social science, we have psychological access to our subjects' internal decision-making processes, to their motivations, to their ideas about how they view the world, to their views about what is the good and proper way to live a human life. We have access to their internal decision-making processes and motivations at a level that we simply cannot obtain from market price quantity data, no matter how much of it we have or how well we torture them. In the end, by torturing the data nearly infinitely and using nearly infinitely amounts of power to analyze it, we may well recover only the psychological insights that are available to us naturally. And there's lots that's not repeatable, lots that happens once and only once and is important. There are few natural experiments, few true natural experiments, and so if we restrict ourselves to positivist tools alone, we wind up finding that much of interest is unidentified. And individuals' preferences, the quote tastes unquote part of quote tastes and technologies unquote, are not primitive, are not the primitive basic things that economics takes as given, but are themselves the result of long and complex historical, sociological, psychological, and yes, economic processes, and we should be able to deal with them within our analysis. You need thickly described case studies and anecdotes, looking out from inside people's minds, before you can tell if your statistical results mean what you assert that they mean. That is, just as a case study requires statistical backing to demonstrate that it's in any sense representative, so statistical backing requires case studies and individual descriptions for its interpretation. Most important, however, Every single piece of economic theory is ultimately a piece of crystallized history. And you have a much deeper and more sophisticated form of knowledge if you know the history, the events, what happened that led people to think that elaborating these particular theories was a task worth doing. If you just do the theory, if you just do the crystallized history stuff, well, there is then a sense in which your thought processes are, they're basically on crack. You're doing the crystal stuff rather than the lines. You're unable to properly process and reflect on the systems of analysis that you are using. Of course, there is a parallel answer to another question, the question of why it is that historians should be forced to take economics and forced to take a lot of economics and especially economic history courses. The answer to the historian's question has, I think, two parts. First, certainly since 1800, and perhaps since 1500, what is most extraordinary and salient and noteworthy about the global society that has existed for the past half millennium is primarily its economic and its scientific aspects, so that you cannot do post-1500 history in any adequate way without knowing the economics, parenthesis, and the science, any more than you can do early Byzantine history properly without knowing a great deal about the theology. They're axial, they're fundamental to those periods. Don't know them at least as background, and you're bound to get it wrong. Second, and just as important, just as every piece of theory is ultimately crystallized history, so every individual historical narrative or judgment is ultimately based on a web of implicit social science theories. And your knowledge of the past is inadequate. Your knowledge of the events or processes or structures is partial, inadequate, and probably wrong if you do not understand your implicit social science theories critically enough to be expert users of them. I'm Brad DeLong. This is my morning coffee.